This is going to be a how-to video on how to troubleshoot and repair your 2-speed actuator for your Eaton 2-speed rear end. They were commonly in Chevy C60s, C70s, Kodiaks, Fords, and Internationals, and other brands, I'm sure. They're usually coupled behind, say, an Eaton 5-speed transmission, actuated by either an air or electric switch. In this case, it would be electric because you have an electric motor here. They did have air versions, in which case this would be an air valve instead of electric motor. But anyway, we're going to test this, put voltage to it, and see if it actuates. And it's not. Alright, so that tells me we either have a bad motor or bad contacts on the inside. I have new contacts ready to go, as well as a new motor. But if you follow along, we'll be able to figure this out together. Mine, when I initially worked on it on the truck, it was bone dry. Everything in here was bone dry and a little corroded. Now that I've driven the truck, yeah, I did put some grease on the threads here and got everything moving. Did the best I could to knock the loose rust and corrosion off, and then I put, like I said, put some grease on the threads. But like I said, since I've driven it, we do have a little bit of gear oil that has seeped into here, kind of lubricating it. This actuator itself, as you can see, that actuator would be what actually interacts with the fork on the rear axle. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take the motor and the wire loose. We're going to test the motor individually to see if it's bad as well. I suspect everything on this one's bad, but we don't know. There we go. Let's try to pull this out earlier. This is actual actuator itself. You can see it's spring loaded both directions. So set that aside. All right, this one, I have 2 screws that are in good shape, and I have 1 broken screw here. So I've taken the 2 screws out. I'll leave them with that cap. All right, you can see here the 2 wires that feed to the motor. We're going to disconnect those from those contacts, and we're going to try to slide that motor out. We'll test the motor real quick, and then see which parts are getting replaced. Like I said, I think everything in here needs replaced, or I think all the electrical parts in here need replaced. All right, we're going to go get a different socket. Okay, had to go run and grab different sockets. We've got, this is a 9mm. I've tried both SAE and metric, and it came out to be a 9mm. Surprisingly, wasn't a 10. So anyway, we're going to take that nut loose, and that allows me to disconnect those wires, so we can get that motor out. We will then test the motor by itself. You may wonder why I'm working on a part for a C70 when I have a C30 behind me. Well, that's because I have a problem, an addiction to buying square body anything. And my buddy Square Body Eric, he has a C60 that's right behind the camera here. I'm pointing. All right, and we got these wires loose. There we go. As you can see, the gasket's completely falling apart. There's new gaskets in there with the new motor. Wipe some of the extra gunk off of here. And we're going to put power to this motor. and see what it does. Uh-oh. Wires aren't quite long enough. Yes. So, got a test probe. I'll power up the test probe while energizing. Alright. So if I put ground to this, it's dead shorted. Alright. Test probe's telling me we have power, positive power coming through that motor. I am hearing squeaking. That's a new one. Alright, so we've determined that our motor is indeed bad. Let's put a negative on there just in case. Whoa! Yeah, that's a dead short inside that motor. So we determined that the motor's bad, and we'll replace the motor and probably replace the contacts as well. I'm going to clean up this housing real quick. We're going to find the fresh gasket and put this back together clean with a fresh gasket. Test probe. We're going to go ahead and take these contacts and replace those real quick while we have it all opened up. And we'll put the motor in, put the contacts on, new gaskets, and everything ready to go. So we weren't getting power through the contacts, and we weren't getting the motor itself had a dead short in it, in this case. Alright, and hammer. It's not the right hammer, but it's a hammer. There it went. Close enough to the right hammer. Alright. Ooh, okay. To get in there where the contacts are, I'm going to have to take this lead screw out. The lead screw does have a self-locking nut right here. So I'll probably put a flat blade screwdriver where the motor would go to be able to stop it from spinning, and then I'll spin that nut, loosen it up, get the lead screw out so I can get to the contacts. Alright, so this nut on my lead screw is a 9/16. Yours may vary. And I need to find a flat blade. There we go. Might need an assistant. We'll see. Just so you know, there's a flat blade screw that holds this contactor assembly in the housing. Alright, so I've got a flat blade screwdriver. I'm going to remove this flat blade screw. Turned a little. All right, what I'm doing here is a trick I learned when I was working at a gun shop. It keeps that screwdriver bit firmly seated in the slot of the screw. Until you break the screwdriver tip. Nope, broke the screw. Alright, this is an Eaton 2-speed rear axle electric motor assembly. As you can see, we're having to replace both the limit switch and a bad power motor. Power comes in through your limit switch, feeds your motor. Motor drives the lead screw assembly. Lead screw assembly drives this actuator. This is double spring loaded, and then this will have pre-tension on the shifting lever of the rear axle. Once you depress the clutch, it unloads the gears just enough that that lever can move, and then your rear axle shifts into whichever gear you've selected. So I'll put this together, and I might have to explain everything again. I will give you a wiring diagram on how this all functions, so follow along. Okay, I like that one. All right, so the power comes in. So the power will come in through these studs. Either one would be positive only. The whole thing grounds through the case off the chassis of the truck, but you'd feed power to either this stud or that stud, energizing this, and then these are what connects to the motor. And so if you're powering this stud, the motor would turn in such a way that the lead screw assembly will turn until it disconnects power. Probably wouldn't disconnect it by much. It would just disconnect power there, and then that motor would stop turning. Same thing if you feed the other direction. We would feed power to that stud, putting power to that wire of the motor, and then once the lead screw assembly gets to there, it'll open that contact and lose power. This is the brand new gasket kit that came with the new motor. And so I'm going to break this open, use this gasket here. We have a gasket for here and a gasket for here. All right, on your lead screw assembly, you have a long pin on one side with a fat pin on both sides. This long skinny pin, it needs to be facing in so it actuates your limit switch when the lead screw assembly gets to the end of its travel. All right, we can see, put the motor on, 3 screws are on there. The wires are connected to the motor. And now we're ready to attach or kind of affix this actuator to the lead screw assembly. What we have, this needs to face through that slot. I put some grease there, put some grease on this. And then this will have to sit on there. Remember, this piece needs to be facing in. All right. There we go. This is pretty much put together. Probably off camera put a little dab of grease on both sides, but you can see I already have a little bit right there. And then we'll put our cover assembly on. Alright, you see we also don't have this end cap on because the gasket's still in there and the end cap's in my hand. What we're going to do is we're going to tighten that nut, but we're going to go ahead and put this cover over first. Also note the cover states it's 12 volts, part numbers, stuff like that. Eaton, use SAE 10 oil, and there's an oil fill. So when this is assembled on the vehicle, they want just a little bit of oil, probably riding on that to cover that bearing, and not quite completely cover the limit switch, but enough to probably keep the limit switch from corroding. So let's get that gasket on there, and we'll plug that in and put the hardware on. Got an extra tab. It's got extra tabs. An extra tab here and here and here and there and there. So maybe I'll trim this and come back to y'all. All right, you can see we've got this hopefully trimmed up to fit. We'll get some screws through it, flip it over, stick it on there. I've watched some videos recently, and the person in the video was mentioning they like to put a little bit of grease on one side of a cork gasket. One, it helps seal the gasket. Two, it kind of helps lubricate the gasket so it doesn't stick to the surface. And have it on pretty good authority, because he's done a lot more wrenching than me, that I would take his advice. Alright, we are getting screws through the gasket, so the gasket should be in the right position once we get the screws in all the right holes. We'll put a dab of grease on there. Why not? It can't hurt. And if you disagree with the grease trick, let me know in the comments and what your theory is on why. Because why not? Doesn't cost anything to make a comment. All right. And by the way, the YouTuber that I was talking about was none other than the great David Freiberger. I will put a little grease there too. Even though I've already greased this pivot point. Have a little pocket of grease down in there for it. Actually, what I want to do before closing this up is I'll go ahead and tighten this, and I'm going to shoot some video of this actuating before we close it up. Alright, so I was using these little guys under this switch, and when the lead screw was moving this would actually contact these studs here that power the motor on the inside. So, two things, I feel like we can trim these off, and we also probably need to trim some height off these studs here because we only need that much. We could trim it all the way down to there. So what I'll do is I'll snug that nut down, and then I'll trim it a little tall with probably a file. But we'll go ahead and trim these right now. Quit running away from me. Maybe. Maybe not. There we go. And I promptly lost it. Here we go. We got it back. So we're going to stick that there. And trim the other one. Same way. Hey, we held on to that one. Alright. And then we'll put this back together. Actually, we're going to go ahead and file the tops of these studs down a little bit to reduce the chance of it arcing in there. We don't want that. So, be right back after I trim that. Alright, you see we're back. I put everything back together. These did get trimmed down. And it looks like this part will clear as it swings by. So next thing I'll do is go ahead and assemble that back in, and we'll see how it does. Alright, that's in. I'll go ahead and wire it up, show you all it moving. It's not going to move as accurately because the shell here holds this pivot point and also preloads the back side of this there. All right, here we go. We're going to go ahead and demonstrate this in action. You can see the red wire, and it should have shut off. With it not having a load, sometimes it runs all the way to the end. Oh, see, this bump jumped out. There we go. There we go. And now we're going to go to the black wire, and it'll move the opposite direction. And there it is. Yeah, with no load, that thing just keeps going, keeps spinning. There we go. Why don't I go grab a drill? And there we go. It's all back together. All right, we're back with the final explanation of the wiring. I'll repeat this because I know I've said it in the video previously, but I want y'all to understand the wiring and how this thing works. Adding power to one of these wires makes the motor run one direction. Adding power to the other wire makes the motor run the opposite direction. Inside here is the switch that shuts it off either direction. It's normally grounded through the case. I had to use a ground wire in the case of this video, but the whole chassis, and this would ground from the whole chassis ground. Then we'd be bringing power from the switch into the middle pin of the switch, and it's a two-way switch. So when the switch is in one position, the motor would be, say, in low, and then before you go to high, you pull the switch, and then you do that before you clutch. And as you clutch and remove it from that gear to go to the next gear, it also allows the rear end to change gears. It's got some spring in here, and that would add preload to everything. And as soon as you relieve the pressure of the gears by using the clutch, then it would be allowed to shift into the next gear. But what I'm describing right here is there's 3 pins on this switch. The center pin is your common positive, and then the other pin would be wired to one side of this motor, and the other pin would be wired to the other side of this motor. And I'm going to wire mine to where up is high and down is low. I don't know how everybody else's was wired from the factory, but that's how I feel it should be wired. And since I have to rewire the entire truck for this anyway, that's how I'm going to wire it. So if you like this type of how-to video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, make some comments. Even if you don't, come back, see us again for the next video. Thanks for watching. Y'all behave.